Hey, I'm Steve Orlando, back again for another conversation in the series we're calling Who's Got the Juice? Some would say Who's Got the Juice with Steve Orlando. The title didn't come from me, but I'll still take responsibility for it. So I'm here today talking to a friend of mine, as always with this interview series, conversation series, sounds better to say. Someone working in an industry far outside of what we do in the spirits world. If this is your first time, myself, currently comic book creator, writer, editor, written for Marvel, written for DC, written for Image Comics, the makers of The Walking Dead, and I've been around the block professionally for 6 years in comic books. But before that, like many folks with an English degree, I needed a day job. So I got into the spirits world, first working retail in Syracuse, then moving to the Hudson Valley, where I met Nick Palazzi, who had just at the time started PM Spirits, a craft spirits importer focusing solely on liquors, not carrying wines. At that time, mostly cognac. That's where he got the name Captain Cognac from, mostly from France. And that relationship continued. As soon as I got full-time into comics, we stayed in touch, and outside of his voicemails in a heavy French accent referring to me as Batman, we've always talked about how we could collab again, and that's how this conversation series came to pass. So we're just meeting people who are similar to PM Spirits, sort of building their own brand, building their own name in different industries, and talking about a given spirit. Today we're going to be talking about Cobra Fire, which we'll bring up a little later, and how their sort of relationship has changed how spirits function in their world, because we all like to kick back every once in a while, but what I find talking to folks is that there's something more. There's a social aspect that happens where you really get a little more out of spirits, and it's different in every industry. So with that in mind, we're talking to my friend Kat Fox. She is both a convention agent, but today we're talking about her career as a professional cosplayer, where she's appeared all over the country doing really, really incredible work in person, on social media. So Kat, hello. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. I'm excited to have a drink and talk about stuff we both love. So with that in mind, few people know what comic books are for sure. I'm guessing maybe not a few know about what you do. So maybe a little more than we have in the past. Talk to folks about what it is you do, because I think it's a really cool thing that not a lot of people know about.
Yeah, so obviously my day job, as you mentioned, is I do convention management, but on the side, and actually for a while as my full-time employment, I did costuming. I don't even really know how I got into it. I just started making costumes. I had friends that did it back in Portland. And then I just got really obsessed with it, as you do with things that you like a lot of the time. I'm pretty much completely self-taught too. So I make well, not all, I do buy some stuff. But I do make all of my armor. So I have a bunch of crazy looking armor costumes that I've made, my hands using foam, just completely from scratch. I also do a lot of sewing stuff. So, but I'm not against buying things sometimes. Sometimes I just don't want to make something, but I still want to dress up as it, and I'll just buy a suit. But yeah, basically what cosplay is just dressing up and like a character and pretending like you're them. Some people think it's a little weird. I am one of those people. I definitely think it's weird, but I also just love it. It's pretty much for me the next best thing to being an actor, because that's fun to me, but not really something I ever wanted to do. But this, I can just dress up and be whoever I want, and also use my creative skills. I get to make it from just a pile of fabric, or a stack of foam. So it's just great. It's really fun.
So I think, one of the things that's interesting that back in my PM Spirits days, working for Nicola, we focused on a lot of producers who, similar to what you're talking about, it was a very small operation. They probably did most of the things themselves, if not a single person in some cases. Not what we're drinking today, but there's plenty of bottles that PM sells that are maybe there's only 2 casks a year made, because it is a sole person doing this passion project and putting it into a bottle. And I think that that's really special. That said, I think it'd be interesting doing all this yourself. Again, a lot of people that are going to watch this probably are just finding out about what you do for the first time, there's probably a lot of obvious challenges, but just like with spirits production, there's probably a lot of unexpected challenges. So like, what are, walk us through that, if you say that you're going to, if there's like a specific character you've loved in the past. I do know you're a huge fan of Magic, for example, from New Mutants. Also the New Mutants X-Men property for folks who are way far out. So I'm sure there's a lot of obvious hurdles, but what are some of the unexpected hurdles of doing this all yourself?
Well, I guess time management is a big thing, because when you're alone, like you don't necessarily, or if you haven't done something a lot or you're inexperienced with like a certain thing, like let's say you have to do like more sewing or more armor or something, you're just not as good at it. You don't necessarily know how long it's going to take you, which for me, time management is definitely something that I think that I have under control when it comes to costuming, but I clearly do not. Like I will be like, oh yeah, I can make this thing in like 5 days, and then I'm up all night trying to make it, not sleeping at all, like burning myself, falling asleep doing it. So definitely the time management. I think also just like you have to sometimes do some like outside thinking and like more creative thinking. Like you have like some of the designs you'll see that people make because it's drawn or whatever, they're not practical. Like they do not, that does not go like that. Like it doesn't. There's gravity and like all of these other outside forces that are real that you don't think about when you're just looking at this costume on paper or like moving on the TV in your animation. So you have to kind of sometimes just be like, well, what the hell can I do to make it look like this at least, or be as close to this? So I would say those are two of the big ones for me anyway.
No, that's what's up. It's guerrilla problem solving,
Yeah.
and I think that that's really interesting. Another thing that I think sort of connects any type of creative industry. Well, first of all, I think a lot of people don't think of spirits as a creative industry. And I think that that is wholly untrue, but I think it's also because most of what folks get, especially when you're up and coming, that is to say a young person, is mass-produced product. And I'm not here to shade mass-produced products. I think there's something to be said about reliability and regularity. But what's sacrificed often is artistry. When the products that PM carries, the products I experienced when I was a rep for them before I went full-time in comics, really made me see that this is, in my opinion, also a creative industry. The difference is that it's not played out over, as the example you said, 5 days or one all-nighter. It's played out, over the course of years, sometimes decades. And so I think the timeline is different and it's hard to see sometimes, but there is so much passion and creativity that goes into these products. And the result, I think, as well, it's what makes craft spirits interesting to me versus mainstream production. And again, like there's something beautiful about the fact that every time you open a bottle of Canadian Club, it tastes exactly like your grandfather, was drinking back in the day, or at least pretty close. There's probably some differences, but there's also something to be said about when you have a bottle that is maybe say one of 250 or 500, that moment, like those flavors and everything that went into the growing the grains or fruits that went into that bottle, and then the aging process, the distillation process, that's a moment in time. That's only going to happen once. And that's an expression of everything happening in that craftsman's life during the production of that bottle. So I do think it's a creative industry in a way that a lot of people don't necessarily think. And I think it's one of the ways in these talks that I think we can sort of make these connections that you wouldn't expect. Nobody looks at costuming and cosplaying and says, this is a thing that's like spirits production, but I think they are both works of passion. They are both creative works. So with that said, you've done a great job building your reputation, your brand, and staying true to yourself when it comes to the types of characters you work with. Obviously, you didn't get there overnight. This has been a journey for PM as well. I've watched as they were at first just doing cognac, and then they pushed out into Armagnac, which we're working with today. And then they pushed out further into single malt, into agave, into American bourbon, American whiskeys in general. So how did you become, you know, the cat fox you are now? Building that brand, building that reputation, it's different for everyone. But again, I think there's a lot of connectivity that people don't expect. So how did you get there?
Oh man, I know it's really weird to think back on. Well, I started actually cosplaying in like I want to say 2013 or 12 or so. And like I had mentioned briefly, I didn't really know a lot about it. And I just kind of started meeting people. I have I get really excited about things and then I take on projects sometimes that I don't necessarily know if I can handle. And one of which was when I was in Portland, I started this group, like an actual group called the Portland League of Geekery. And it was like, I like connected with this this like board game shop called Guardian Games. And they like let me do like host events there. And I started hosting these events in Portland for other people to teach them how to make cosplay stuff. So like that was a big part of how I got my like foot in the door in the community in Portland. I just started meeting everybody because there weren't a lot of cons yet really there. And then I just started making like events and like making the things so that I could see the people and get to know the people. I was also doing a lot of modeling for another group, the Living Dead Girls at the time then. And I started reaching out to like Rose City Comic Con, which is now huge, which was like their first year there. And I was like, hey guys, like, could we be there? And so like, I just basically like when I wanted something, I just like went for it, I guess. I tried really hard, or I was like, how do I get this thing that I want? How do I like make it so that I can make money from this and make more costumes and like go places and not just be in Portland, or you know what I mean, like teach more people. And so then I just kept putting myself out there and just like kept trying to use like my resources like Instagram and you know like hashtags and like posting and doing shoots as much as I could. I just like tried to make a bunch of content and tried to figure out how fuck I could get it like out there for people to see it. So it was a lot of like honestly being probably annoying. But it got, you know, it worked, I guess. So that's
It
good.
worked. Your power is immense now, so I would say that it did work.
Yes.
You took on another thing that I always think is interesting to talk about in these conversations. You know, Captain Cognac, founder of PM Spirits, had a whole career before he started this company. PM stands for Paul Marie. That's the name for his father. And so it's always interesting to me to talk about that. You know, everybody tends to look at someone who's fully formed, be it myself, be it you, be it Nicola, be it, you know, the folks that are selling the things we're talking about today, and just sort of assume that that was always the plan, or that, you know, this was always the way they were. I mean, me, like we're here talking because of my gig and the relationships I built before I was full-time in comics, before I was where I was fully formed, or people would assume that I am. That said, you know, I was a lifeguard. I was a lot of things before. I'm always interested for people who have found success in their chosen field. Like, what were those gigs before? I mean, the first question is, how did you get there, and what were the gigs before? And then the other thing that's of note before you answer that I always think is interesting is, were there surprising things you learned in those past gigs that you apply to your chosen passion? For me, I'll say, before the roles flipped and I was full-time in comics, loving comics, working in comics, loving comics lore, you know, knowing, you know, however many people had ever worn the Captain America costume, being able to name every single Flash at DC or something like that. Actually applied really, really well to when I was working in spirits, and I could memorize all of these small facts about a given bottle. You know, what I found appealing about both industries that I didn't expect is that there was no ceiling. You could never learn it all. There was always more minutia, points of interest to learn. And so for me, when I was selling spirits for 10 years, you know, I applied all the time I spent in DC Who's Who and Marvel Handbook and all those things, memorizing these characters. I applied that selling spirits and learning everything I could about all these bottles we were growing. So I'm sure there's things that you've learned in previous gigs that help you over deliver where you are now. And I'm always interested in talking about that.
Yeah, I've had a lot of really weird jobs throughout my life. One of my first jobs was actually in a comic book store, though, which was really fun. It was like a coffee comic book store. So obviously there, because cosplay and comics don't necessarily have to be related, but they can be, and for me they are because I do tend to cosplay from comic books that I like or characters that I like. So that just like getting to see the costumes and having the accessibility was always really nice. I did some other like artistic type jobs, like I did like some ceramic type things and other just like wood building. So that those skills, though I haven't had to do much actual wood work with my costumes, has been really, really helpful. Just like practicing, like honestly, just like sizing things and making patterns and stuff like that. So that was incredibly helpful. And just knowing how to use some of the tools, like, because I still do use like Dremels and stuff like that, or just like hot knives, which you would use in some of the other creative fields that I worked in.
I don't
Um,
even know what a hot knife is, and I used to make custom figures as a kid all the time. So the Dremel I know, but the hot knife I'm unfamiliar with.
yeah, it's just like so you can cut. Basically, it's what it sounds like. It's a hot knife,
No,
basically.
it's a lightsaber. I understand.
So, and just also just like with the modeling stuff that I did and like some management stuff, it just helped me understand kind of more social media things, I guess, like what is neat, like the algorithm a little bit and like how often you should post and like the necessity of needing to post. And yeah, just like talking to people too, just knowing how to talk to people and have conversations with people you don't know and how to end conversations with people if you need to, or you know what I mean, just to sell stuff. It really just, I've just learned so much shit that I can just use in this cosplay world. It's actually kind of weird. But I'm so happy to have learned so much random things and that I actually can use them. I'm glad I didn't waste my life doing like something that I will never use or that I just hated.
If that's even possible, like the more I talk to people, it seems like there's something to be drawn from almost every gig. Like
That's good then.
it's people
Yeah.
expect. But you actually sort of segued in perfectly to what I would want to talk about next. You're talking about talking to people, and I think the fascinating thing about spirits, and you travel a lot internationally, so this is also like a multi-part thing that I'm interested in. I think the culture changes. My understanding, I went to college. I was a guy who was like playing King's Cup and man, drinking the Keystone Light, hunting the Keystone traditional red can. It was like a unicorn for me. And as I got out and I got into the industry, yeah, I started to appreciate the greater social aspect of spirits. I was speaking in one of the previous interviews to someone who said that it's almost like sitting down and having a drink with someone is almost like an offering. Like it is, because especially with the types of things we sell, but in general, a cocktail, a special bottle, that's a moment, and you're offering that moment to share with someone else. And that there's especially once you become an adult, often a greater significance to it. And I think the culture around it differs across the world.
Mm-hmm.
The lower proof wines and things from Europe, it's because the idea is not to just like completely forget your name. The idea is that you want something you can be, yeah, maybe you can drink this all day, and you can sort of get in the spirit. That's why those are called spirits,
Mm-hmm.
but not obviously completely lose yourself. So for me, yeah, the role of bottles in my life has definitely evolved, and it's been fascinating to me. Now, it's a conversation starter. It's been a maker of inroads for me when I was a wine and spirit specialist. Before I was full time in comics, when I met people, they would think that I was like a sorcerer, and it was easy for me to. It was something to talk about. It was like a conversation starter. It was a foothold somewhere that I maybe wouldn't have had one before. So for yourself, how have you seen that change? From where you were to where you are now, and also like when you travel, because you go even more places than me for the job that brought us together. Do you see it play out differently in different places that you've been?
Um, I feel like honestly, there are some differences, but the common thing is at like all shows that I go to in every state and in every country that I've been to is just like the bar con afterward, like where everybody, whether or not you're actually drinking or getting like really drunk or, just hanging out, like it really does just like bring everybody together. And so honestly, like there's like subtle differences, I guess, like I guess more like how rowdy people get. But the bottom line is that like it really does seem to just bring everyone together. It's like if you don't know whether you didn't see someone all day at the con, you know what I mean? Like you're too busy like working or cosplaying, but you can almost like 100% guarantee that you're going to see them like at the, like hotel bar afterward. And then you can say hi and chat and, like hang out and have fun and have a drink. And I just really appreciate that because like most of the time when I'm working, I'm not doing cosplay stuff anymore. As you know, I'm working like doing the agent type stuff. I can't really leave and I can't really see people. Or when I am cosplaying, I'm in a costume and half the time I can't see because I like, I just can't see. I'm uncomfortable. I'm like, it's just like
costumes are impractical. What are you trying to say?
They're very impractical a lot of the time, like awful. Some of the things I've had to wear, I can't even move. Like I can't move. I just like have a pose and I'm stuck there.
Well, you're good Michael Keaton, so that's fine.
Yes, of course. That's fine. But yeah, so I guess just it's nice to have that thing. There's not a big difference, I guess, and I like that because I just have that reliable moment and that reliable time where I can just see my friends and like just chill. I don't have to worry about work anymore.
It's the excuse to relax.
It is, yeah.
Because oftentimes when you're freelance, you need that.
Mhm.
There's I could be working all the time, every day if I wanted to, and I'm sure that between all of your gigs, life is similar. You have to, in a way that is different than when you're salaried or something, you have to carve out that time. You're like, no, this is where I'm gonna not do work because otherwise, it doesn't happen. There's always someone that wants something more from you.
I know. I know. I feel like I am working all the time though now during those times because of when I'm not at a show like for myself to cosplay, I feel like I end up working sometimes on those nights, even when I'm at the bar trying to chill and like relax, but that's okay.
Sure. So before we get into talking about Cobra Fire, what is your normal drink? We'll get to why I sent this to you, but in a void, you're at the replicator on the Enterprise. What is your drink?
I would probably, honestly, I really love ciders. When I do drink liquor, I am kind of like a shitty college student, I guess. I like vodka Red Bulls. So, I'm just like forever thinking I'm 21, I guess. I like them a lot though. They taste so good.
There's nothing wrong with that. The best drink is the one you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, so I sent you the Cobra. I think you had said that you were interested in vodka, and I sent you the Cobra Fire, which it has a Cobra on the label. So it wasn't just because I thought you would like the label, but
I do like the label though.
That does play a role. But I also think it's a really cool spirit. It is an eau de vie de raisin, and my French, for all who just heard me, not the best. Lived in Russia, studied Russian, speak Russian, not French. But that said, what that means, it is made from the grapes that normally go into an Armagnac. It is essentially a fresh Armagnac, and it's a thing that at PM they've been sort of talking about for a long time because I think it has a lot to offer. Here, like there'd be the urge to call it like a moonshine, for example. But I think that because it's made from grapes and because of the level of craftsmanship with it, it is going to behave somewhat differently. It's going to be a little less edgy. The grapes themselves are a little softer, and it does spend some time in stainless steel tanks resting down. So even though it doesn't have any color like it would if it was rested in oak or something like that, it is settled in a way that is very nice. It lets things integrate. So what you have here is a spirit that I think can play for vodka drinkers, but it also can sort of stand on its own. It would be really good with your favorite Red Bull, actually. But at the same time, like I just think you've got something that is bright, you've got something that is floral, and in some ways actually reminds me of some of the best vodkas I've had, which are sort of lighter in taste.
Mm-hmm.
But on the nose, they do have a lot of almost floral, fruity types characters, especially some potato vodkas.
Yeah.
So we can taste it now. And you're going on the rocks, which is always a good call because it is overproof at 50.2 or 50.5% alcohol. So
It's actually really easy. I was expecting it to be a little bit harder to do without any mixer. I asked Steve earlier if I should get one because I didn't have any. And he told me he wasn't doing one, so I decided I wouldn't either. But yeah, it's actually a lot easier than a vodka. I couldn't just do this with a vodka personally. I couldn't, like a straight vodka.
well, I mean, that is good to hear. Yes, I mean, I didn't mean to completely shame you about a mixer. You could have showed up with one. I would never. These are free-form
I
conversations.
was trying to keep us, we can just do the same thing. It'll be nice and easy.
But the cool thing is, yeah, like I was glad that you had it on the rocks because one of the nice things about these spirits in general, it's very rare that you see them directly at 80 proof, which is the traditional proof for at least the American mainstream. And that's because they sort of don't like to get in the way of what something is like coming out of the barrel. And they also, know that we like to have things on the rocks. The issue with that is when you put it with ice, as the water melts, it unlocks, it unlocks a lot of the chemical, chemical compounds inside of a spirit. And if you have something right around 80 proof, well, then it's going to fall down once you add ice to it into something where it sort of falls apart. But overproof spirits in general, this is not just about us. Oftentimes you want to have them on ice because it sort of unlocks a lot of the softer flavors and things go onto it. And I think that that's really, really special. It's like I used to have customers that were really into like man stuff, and they would buy these like 130 proof bourbons. And then they, I don't put ice in my whiskey. And like, okay, cool, man. But they would come back, their eyebrows just burn off, basically. And it's like, no, like, I understand your need to prove your masculinity, but at the same time, like, that's not how the spirit is intended to be drank. So I think it's really nice to show that with overproof stuff, again, like we've been talking about, you see that these are almost they're living bottlings. Like they change, they evolve in the glass. And all of that to me is sort of what's special about craft production because like you really get something that is never going to be the same. You get something that had someone's hand guiding it. And I think that that's really, really special. And so with Cobra Fire, yeah, it's trying to get something new into the minds of folks here in America. We don't think of Armagnac, fresh Armagnac, as necessarily a go-to. But here, we've shown that it can be really a lot more dynamic. And I think that that is really, really special. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is nice on its own. It's nice on the rocks. I think it has great applications in cocktails. And I think it's just a nice, fresh summer type of spirit. And it's exciting for me when I show it to people such as yourself that maybe have never had something like it before. And you're like, oh, this is, like we've shown you something new. Yeah, I'm interested now that you've tasted it. And since you shaded me over the mixer, what are your thoughts about that now?
About whether or not I should have one?
What you would use? I mean, you can always.
What I would use?
Mixer cocktail applications are always out there.
Honestly, maybe like cranberry. I would try. I would see how that would taste. They're both really it's soft, but it's still kind of sharp, and I feel like it would go nicely with the sharpness. Cranberry to me is really sharp. It's like very a lot, and I just
it's bold.
It's very bold. Yeah, I feel like it would go well together. I'd be down to try it with some Red Bull too, maybe.
Well, if we have you back, we can do an all Red Bull. Like instead of drinking like one spirit, we'll try the whole catalog, but it'll only be
with Red Bull. I love it.
It'll be just like a blind Red Bull tasting.
Love it.
So with that in mind, yeah, I'm excited we could try that. And as I said, this is a living moment, I think, and that's really, really cool. That's what you get with any type of craft production. So this isn't just about PM, it's about sort of artisanal production in general.
Mhm.
And I think that is really helpful when trying to build what a group like PM is about versus all the competition. So to close up, because we've actually crushed this half hour very nicely.
Wow, yeah, that was
I
fun.
thought, what's next, do you think, for your industry? And I think that's always my final question. I think you're going to see more and more, craft spirits have become almost mainstream, and just like my own industry, like where ours connect, in the stuff that I was getting thrown in lockers for in high school.
Mhm.
Now I go back to see my friends from high school and they're like, oh, do you know about Deathstroke? Like, who's Steve Trevor? And I'm just like, okay, dude, like, yes, I know all these people.
Mhm.
You also used to beat me up for it. So cool.
Right.
And at the same time, I'm shocked how much people know in the mainstream about spirits. So if what used to be niche is now mainstream, for us, I think it's going to be even more specificity. It's going to be even more awareness of things like this. It's going to be an openness to try new things. It's only going to exponentially increase. I think you're going to see stuff that you never heard of before, but now you're going to see it in places that it normally wouldn't be, where maybe it was just a weird cocktail bar. Now you're going to see it, at a place your parents go in
Right.
years or something like that. Not that parents can't be into weird cocktails. So within your own industry, to wrap up, like what's next? Like how is not necessarily 2020, we're all hiding inside, but technology, social media, awareness, like for what you do and love, like where is it going? How can it evolve?
Man, I don't know. It's crazy because I feel like the cosplay community is constantly evolving more so than any other community that I've been a part of. Like, because the problem, it's not necessarily a problem, but the thing with cosplay is it is very easy to get into, right? So like a lot of people do it. And in order to make money off of it, you have to be like the first or like way up there, at least like one of the first people to do something or a character. And so it's like I can't even fathom what is next because like honestly I can't even hardly keep up with what people are doing nowadays. Like I feel like I am like really lacking over here because like I'm just like, oh, okay, there's this trend happening now. And then like I'm like, great. And maybe I'm getting ready to do it. And then there's like already like another one happening. So maybe I need to do some research and like brush myself up and get a little bit better at following, like what's actually coming. So sorry, that question, I have no idea. I have no idea. It's just honestly, the possibilities are just like endless.
Well, yeah, it sounds like it sounds like what's coming is in fact like because of the possibility, we just know that it's going to continue and flourish and evolve.
Right. There's gonna be something.
you know, to quote pro wrestling, the only thing for sure in cosplaying is that nothing is for sure. It's
Yes,
and,
that's how I feel about it anyway. I
and
don't know if other people have better ideas on it, but
well, I think that's really cool, and I think that you are across the board watching what used to be the niche enter into the mainstream is really exciting because with it comes recognition. Like I don't think that I could have ever been full-time writing comics, talking about craft spirits, talking to someone who is full-time at least in cosplay and in geek culture. Like
mhm.
I would not have thought this conversation possible even when I was young trying to break into comics. So it is an exciting moment for me to be able to share a drink with you uh, and talk about how it could fit into your life and talk about your life and talk about how these industries are always more similar than we ever expect. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks
Uh, you
for
know,
having me.
we can do some additional side content of our lightning round, our Red Bull lightning round,
Mhm.
and hey, I really appreciate talking to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Me too.